Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Wait a minute, Danna, you're joining me this week? Where's Zain?
I don't know. I had to step in and take Zan's shoes for the week. I know I stepped in for you a couple weeks ago, but had to switch it up this time and do a show with you.
All right, fair enough. So welcome to episode 72 of the MMA Outsiders. I'm Tom Albano. That's Patrick Danna. Usually we call him producer Pat, but as he said, Pat Danna stepping into the co-host role as Zain Bando is off this week. A lot that we have to break down. So, Pat, I'm actually really glad to have you this week because I want to get some of your insight on the topics that we're going to be talking about here because we got a lot that we got to break down. 298 just happened. New featherweight champion, Ilia Topuria, the new king at 145. Spectacular performance, spectacular finish. And we got a couple of big cards this weekend. PFL versus Bellator, UFC in Mexico City. It's going to be an absolute blast. It's a lot that we have to go through this week. But before we get into any of that, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and the platform that is now known as X, which is the former Twitter. You can check all that out at MMA Outsiders ETB. In addition, you can follow the Empty the Bench Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube home, youtube.com/ETB Network. On the climb to 700 subscribers. If you are watching us on YouTube, we thank you so much. Don't forget to take the MMA Outsiders and the Empty the Bench Network on the road with you on Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all our audio-only platforms. If you are listening on those audio-only platforms, we thank you, and we want you to also come to the YouTube home. Go to etbpodcast.com for more information about the network, plus content, blogging content from some of our contributors. That, of course, is Pat Danna. That's not Zain Bando this week. This is Patrick Danna, usually our producer, still our producer, but filling in for Zain this week. He's a journalist for Combat Sports UK, and you can follow him at Pat Danna MMA. And Tom Albano, contributor to MMA News, Fansided MMA, and I'll be starting my run with the PFL for 2024 this Saturday with the PFL versus Bellator for their website. So I'll be all over that. So make sure to stay tuned with me for updates for that card. And you can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. Also, one shout out to the new network sponsor. Well, it's not a new sponsor. They've been with us since Football Friday, and now that partnership has expanded. So this edition of the MMA Outsiders, of course, is presented by Wolf Spreads. Are you looking to get involved in the action while rooting for your favorite team? Have you ever had a friendly debate on who can pick more games correctly? Does all this talk about parlays, lines, and over-unders make your head spin? And you want to learn more about the sports betting hoopla? Gamble with us and come check out Wolf Spreads. So for all this time during the NFL season, we have run sports betting competitions completely free on Wolf Spreads. Here's how it works. Everybody gets 2,000 fantasy dollars, fake money, to bet on games with. Whoever can profit the most of their $2,000 bankroll wins. And if you're not an NFL fan, and of course the NFL season's over, so you need more stuff to bet on, to do the fantasy bets, to do the competitions with, don't worry. Wolf Spreads has competitions available for the NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, all that, so much more. Put fantasy dollars on the over-under, the money line, or the spreads, competing for bragging rights with your fellow players while having additional fun watching sports, and not risking losing your house in the process. Wolf Spreads, sports betting for friends who love the action. All right, and if there's two people who love the action, it's us.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a lot of bashing your face in kind of action.
Yeah, most definitely. And as you said, Tom, we have a busy week. We had a busy week this past week, and we have a lot to talk about here. There's some big news in MMA this week. Big news.
So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into things. We're not going to do our recap or previews because the big talking point at this point is the UFC 300 card. It's a little less than 2 months away, And we finally have a main event, and it's Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill for the light heavyweight title. So Zain and I talked last week. Hamzat Chimaev, they tried to get in, but visa issues with dealing with the U.S. travel wasn't going to work. They were desperate to try to get John Jones to maybe fight Tom Aspinall in an undisputed title fight, but John Jones, of course, still recovering from his torn pec, so he's not going to be ready. They even had talk about Leon Edwards versus Bilal, but of course they didn't want to do that. They had, according to Ariel Helwani, 3 opponents potential for Leon Edwards. Leon said yes to all of them, and all the others, Hamzat with his visa issues, Shavkat Rakhmonov, and a champ versus champ fight with Islam Makhachev. All 3 of them said no. 2 of them because of, at least 2 of them is because Ramadan, which we already talked about last week when we saw that post mid-recording from Hamzat saying, I'm not fighting during Ramadan.
Yep.
So, UFC, and of course the UFC didn't want Bilal Muhammad to main event UFC 300. The last talk we had heard, potentially, was Israel versus Dricus du Plessis for UFC 300. And Pat, according to sources you talked to, that seemed to be the plan. Especially because we saw that clip. I don't know if we talked about it on the episode, but I saw it later in the week, the clip from Eugene Behrman, one of Israel Adesanya's coaches, saying that Izzy was in camp and ready to go.
Yeah, no, I think that my source was definitely accurate. And I feel like I don't know what happened. I feel like they had to pivot last minute due to situations with Dricus, because like you said, it seems like Izzy was ready to take the fight, but I don't know if Dricus was. And from what I know, that was nearly a done deal, but they ended up opting with Pereira Hill.
I mean, I would heard, this is not from any sort of source, this is just browsing through the MMA Twitter space, that maybe some sort of injury to either Dricus or Israel has forced a little postponement of this. And we'll talk about that but when we do our, like I do with Xander, future matchmaking, future scheduling of what Dricus versus Izzy could be. Nevertheless, we are stuck with Pereira versus Hill, which we thought was going to main event UFC 301, which we'll talk about because that got confirmed on Saturday for May 4th in Rio. I want to take a little pause here because Zain did provide a couple of audio recordings to share his thoughts on some topics. This is one of them. Let me throw it over to Zain right now.
This is Zain Bando from the MMA Outsiders, just doing a quick reaction audio recording in my absence of tomorrow's episode 72 regarding UFC 300 being headlined by Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. Want to get something out of the way really quick. I think that the UFC was dealt a forced hand. There's no Conor McGregor. There's no John Jones. There's not even a possibility of Brock Lesnar. Reasons are obvious for that. I think, given who was available, this was the fight the UFC had to make. There was also the possibility of Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. But as we all know, that fight lacks the star power that the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship does. And I think that's partially the reason why this fight was booked, was simply because of that. And I think it's something that I think fans need to be wary of. UFC 200 was Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes. That's a fight that was not the original main event. UFC 100 was a little bit of a bigger scale. You had Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. And I think it's just the evolution of the sport. You're going to get 3 really good cards in a row like we're getting with 298, 299, and 300. And if you look at 300 as a holistic card, this is a B plus A minus level main event, and your B plus A minus level card. And I think, when you put the main event on top of it, not everyone's going to be happy, but I think, this is the kind of thing that the UFC tells you, we have a menu of fights. You either like Dana White Contender Series, you like UFC Fight Nights, or you like UFC pay-per-views. And I think this is one of those scenarios where you have to understand what the consumer wants, and not every consumer is going to want Pereira versus Hill, while other consumers may have wanted Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler or Nate Diaz. So this was the hand the UFC was dealt, and those are my thoughts on the 300 main event. It is going to deliver. I'm not worried about that. I think it was just the fan reception, and I think it was definitely very mixed.
So, Pat, I mean, I understand Zan's point that it looks like the UFC, and like we were just talking about, didn't really have much of a choice. They needed a main event, and I
Oh
think
yeah,
they're putting a lot of, that Alex Pereira, considering all that he's done in his short time in the UFC with his feud with Izzy and winning the light heavyweight title, becoming a two-division champ in such a short time in MMA, that he's got all the star power and that maybe he's what is needed at this point for UFC 300. But considering, Izzy and Drickus, considering Connor Chandler, which we'll get into, I can't help, Pat, but feel a little bit of disappointment at this.
Oh, I mean, there definitely has to be some disappointment. Dana's words after UFC 297 were that we weren't going to be able to handle the main event. And I'm sorry, but everyone already thought this fight was going to headline UFC 301. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the plan and that it just got pushed back. So the fact that Dana acted like it was this thing we were never going to hear of makes me think that he was working on something else at that time that they were forced last minute. I mean, Jamahal Hill said that this fight was offered to him on Friday. And I think it might have been already offered for 301, but offered for 300. He said it was offered to him on Friday. So I don't know how that I don't know how you can think that the UFC wasn't forced to work out something last minute. It had to be a last minute option. It had to be, just a last resort basically because they didn't want this fight to headline 300. They wanted it to headline 301.
Right. And I mean, I get it in terms of the championship like structure, but when you look at those fights, because now I can't say UFC 300 is a bad card because you look at all the star power and all the matchups on there. You know, I mean, you just look at the undercard with Aljamain Sterling making his featherweight debut, Kayla Harrison making her UFC debut, Charles Oliveira returning to the cage, Yuri Prohaska returning to the cage. There's a lot of names and a lot of interesting matchups for this card.
Definitely.
But and I was talking about this with Sam, I think we maybe were in a little bit of a disagreement. But you look at this fight, and then you look at the women's strawweight title fight between Weili Zhang and Yan Xiaonan, and the BMF title fight between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway. Because from what Dana's comments at the press conference were, it seems that Weili versus Yan is going to be the co-main event, and
Yes.
Justin Gaethje Max Holloway is third from the top.
Mhm.
And I don't want to come off sounding like some of these MMA Twitter assholes or some of these particular YouTubers, who want to make, chauvinistic kind of comments, but I can't believe we're going to book Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway, fake belt or not, under the women's strawweight title fight.
I guess it would be to set the precedent that the actual titles still matter more than the BMF title. I mean, obviously they're giving the BMF title enough credit to keep it going this far in, but I think they want to, show that the actual titles still mean a lot more than something like that. And
Which
that's all
Pat
I
is
can think of.
which Pat is understandable, but then why do we have the BMF title belt? Because if it wasn't for the fact that they're trying to promote this as a title fight, I would understand Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. Although to be fair, I'm more hyped for Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway than I am for Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill. I think
Yeah.
Gaethje and Holloway have the star power that they could have been the main event of UFC 300.
Hell yeah. I mean, John Anik said at the fan Q&A that he thought Gaethje Holloway would end up as the main event of 300, and I don't think that really would have hurt anyone to see that fight as the main event, as long as the rest of the card was good, and it's great. So
and to be very honest with you, and I told Sam this too because I know he loves this fight. I'm more excited for Gaethje Holloway, and I'm more excited for Weili Zhang versus Yang Xiaonan than I am for Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill.
man, I just wish Wei Li and Yan got to fight in China, because from what I know, I mean, that fight would be so big in China, because like Yan is like a heel and Wei Li is like their star and like the one they all root for. So I feel like that fight would have just been so big over there, to the point where I would have loved to see how it would look in an arena in China. But the fight's great. Yan Xiaonan is very solid. I mean, I watched her knock out Andrade in person, and then I also watched that same night Wei Li dominate Amanda Lemos, and they're both probably the best women at the weight class right now, and it's definitely a good fight. I just wish it was happening in a different place.
I know. And I agree with you. I guess it's just sometimes a little hard to get cards over in China that this is what they're left with. And number two, I guess they're trying their best to keep them, like they're gonna have this fight, and then they're gonna do the no. I assume they're saving Valentina and Grasso for no UFC to be that main event, which we'll talk about when we do the little matchmaking scheduling. I'm wondering if that's gonna become pay per view. And I'm wondering if they're saving that for that, so that way, as long as Weili wins this fight, she can move up and challenge the winner of Grasso Shevchenko 3 in a super fight.
That would honestly be perfect. I mean, that's a fight that I think we would all like to see, and I think that Weili has been a good enough champion that you can justify her going up to double champion status at this point without, without any real controversy, like,
Mhm.
oh, she should be defending in her weight class. And
And
no,
you want to talk about her popularity in China? Could you
Mhm.
imagine if she becomes a champ? What that's going to do for her in China and
And
globally?
yeah, I was gonna say, even in the USA, I mean, she'd be one of the only women's champs ever. And I mean, she probably could be. She probably could be, to be honest. I could see her beating both Grasso and Shevchenko if she fights the right way. So I'd be very interested to see it, to be honest.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a little I like the match, Pereira versus Hill. It's deserved.
Hmm.
Pereira beat Yuri. We talked about the puzzling picture of light heavyweight. Jamahal Hill obviously never lost his title in the cage. He got an injury, was forced to vacate. But, as a UFC 300 main event, and what's funny? When Jamahal Hill was shown on camera at 298, he
Hmm.
didn't really get a really positive fan reaction, and like
Really?
some people on MMA Twitter, I'm wondering if some of that is because of some of the comments he's had over the past year that maybe have rubbed some fans the wrong way.
Yeah, it seems like while he's been out of competition, he might have lost a couple fans due to his antics on social media and his antics outside of the cage. I know he had the arrests with beating up his brother and stuff like that. So there's definitely been some issues with Jamal that might have turned a couple fans against him. I feel like most people still like Jamal, but it definitely is one of those situations where his stock hasn't rose since he got hurt. It's definitely went down a bit.
Yeah. So the only thing I can think of, like I said, is Alex Pereira and his name and his star power coming over from kickboxing, doing all he's done in MMA.
Well,
So
wait. Well, also, let's not forget. I mean, Alex Pereira was in Glover Teixeira's corner when Jamahal Hill put the beating on him.
yeah.
So that's and then it sucks because that happened so long ago that a lot of people are forgetting about that storyline. And I really hope it gets brought back up in the lead up to this fight because it's a very massive storyline. Pereira's already beat Yuri. He's already beat Yan. I mean, he's already beaten a couple of the guys that Glover had fought. So
Mhm.
this would be another big moment for Pereira's career if he can take out Jamahal Hill.
Absolutely. I say it's just a shame that light heavyweight at this point, is such a cursed division.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Pereira because one thing I did say, because I had done a little reaction video on our social media
Mhm.
about this, and I said, this smells to me one of two things. Is that 301, this means, hey, either they see enough in Alex Pantoja that they'll be willing to have him as a main event defend against the Moreno Royval winner from this Saturday, or the issues with Hamza, the visa issues. Maybe they're saying, okay, maybe if we put them in Brazil, he won't run into those visa issues. And basically, that was my initial instinct was that, oh, we need a main event for 300. The U.S. government's not letting Hamza. We'll just do Le Switcheroo and we'll just settle it that way. But then over the last 24 hours, Alex Pereira on his YouTube channel discussed being the UFC 300 main event. And now, apparently, he is hoping to do a 21-day turnaround, defend the light heavyweight title against Jamahal Hill at UFC 300, beat him, and then defend the light heavyweight title in his home country of Brazil at UFC 301.
I mean, if he somehow is able to do this, it would be monumental. I mean, I think it said that the closest turnaround between championship title defenses was 50. Well, no, because Figgy won the title in one of those. So these are both defenses. They said it was 56 days for Ronda Rousey with back-to-back title defenses. And
I knew it. I knew how to be either Ronda Rousey or Tito
Mhm.
Ortiz.
Yeah, and he absolutely would smash that record with 21 days, with a 21-day turnaround if he is able to do that. The problem is, I mean, is that even realistic if he doesn't knock out Jamahal in the first round? If that fight goes at least 10 minutes, he's going to take some blows. I mean,
That,
I
that
don't
was
know
gonna
how
be my question.
I don't know how realistic it is that he's able to turn around unless he goes in there, sparks Jamahal, and then gets right out. So, I don't know.
That's the only thing that I can think of is he thinks the Jamahal Hill fight is going to be a quick enough fight, or that he's not going to take as much damage. Maybe it's a grapple fest that he can do some sort of turnaround.
I
The,
guess.
the last time, because the last time we had anything like this was end of 2020, where you had Moreno beating Royval in their first fight, and then Figgy defending the title. Was it against Alex
Alex
Perez?
Perez, yes.
And then Dana in a last minute, because 256, you had a whole bunch of title fights falling out on that one that he that night said, okay, Moreno, Figgy, sit down here. I'm gonna give you this money.
Yeah.
Do a short notice main event. And then we ended up getting the Figgy Moreno rivalry that
And
ended up
that
being
was because Figueiredo ran through Alex Perez in one round and didn't take any damage. So it would have to be a similar situation for Alex Pereira in order to make a turnaround like this.
which is funny because you think of the Figgy Moreno rivalry that we got from that, and Pantoja beating Moreno. That's why I'm wondering if Moreno beats Royval again on Saturday. Pereira can't go and do this, or if they want to save Leon for something else, which we'll talk about in a second. Would the UFC have the confidence in running Pantoja Moreno in Brazil, a flyweight title main event?
It'd be a rare move out of the UFC for sure. We don't see flyweight main events often, and I would have to say we don't see that. They'd mix for another last minute option that has nothing to do with Brazil, but I don't know. I couldn't see them headlining that fight in Brazil
Neither
unless they
can
had
I.
to.
Neither can I, but all the scrambling and everything just is confusing. Because if Alex Pereira does not fight in Brazil because of the 300 move, they're the ones I feel the most for. Because they were expecting, with all that Alex Pereira is doing, their guy was going to be main eventing. And then all of a sudden that gets taken away from them.
Yeah, no, it's a tough situation for sure because obviously the UFC was looking to make this Pereira Hill fight for 301, and now they had to push it up, and it kind of just it's going to cause, like you said, more scrambling and more issues because now they're going to need to. Yeah, it's going to be a ripple effect because they need to find something to get 301 to the caliber of card that Brazilian fans deserve. And we know Brazilian fans are a bit ruthless, so you can't really throw like an average card in front of them and expect them to be okay with it.
And you know what? I'm actually going to switch up a little bit of our topics. I'm just going to do a one switch here because we're talking about the ripple effect. All the dominoes falling. And I'm wondering if a lot of this stretches back to last year because we never got Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler for any of these cards, for 296, for 300. And now it seems like at the post-fight press conference for 298, Dana White was being very shy and saying, it's up to Conor if he wants to fight. He's got all this money. And now it seems like the future of this fight's in question.
Yeah, no, definitely. It seemed like Dana was annoyed that he was asked about Conor, and what he said to the reporter was, "If you had that much money, would you be sitting there right now? Would you want to come to work? Would you want to this?" It was not promising whatsoever in terms of potentially seeing Conor fight again in the future. He really kind of just shut it all down and was like, "Yeah, if Conor wants to do it, he'll do it." But no, like it's a complete change in tone from what we've heard a little bit ago, and it honestly kills any hope I had for Conor McGregor returning this year and maybe even ever, honestly.
And if this is the case, then I stand by everything I've said over the last year. Then Tough 31 was an absolute waste of time. And it's a shame because, and Dean Thomas talked about this in an interview, I forget the source that I was talking to. I'll look that up.
Okay.
But basically what he said was, hey, you would assume that with Roadhouse coming up next month, that maybe he would want to do a fight there to do a little promotion about this. Oh, it was Sports Not, by the way.
Okay.
and he basically Dean Thomas slammed Conor McGregor, basically saying, I'm tired of this, and I'm tired of him dragging Chandler along. And I stand by again what I said a couple weeks ago, that I think if Michael Chandler, let's say out of desperation, UFC needs something for International Fight Week, and they offer him Islam. At this point, I'm taking the Islam title fight because I'm done. I'll be honest, if this is the direction we're going in, that I never want to see Conor McGregor in the cage again.
Exactly. I mean, it seems like his will to fight is gone. Like, it seems like he has no will to actually compete anymore. It seems like he's just kind of playing games. Especially, makes me feel horrible for Michael Chandler, who waited years for this fight and still hasn't really gotten anywhere with it. And it just sucks.
I'll be very honest. I think if you're Dana White, you make it up to him by either doing a title eliminator or giving him a shot against Islam next, especially if Gaethje's fighting Max Holloway in April.
I mean, it would be a little strange only because, Chandler has lost to Gaethje, but he would deserve it. I mean, Chandler, I don't know how many people would be complaining about a Chandler title shot, knowing how he's wasted so much of his career just sitting on the sidelines waiting.
But now that I actually think about it, it is weird too, because Charles Oliveira never got his rematch, and they're going to feed him to Arman Tsarukyan at 300.
Oh God, yeah. No, this lightweight situation is going to get a little crazy. We're going to need Islam to come back and start defending that title soon.
But that's the thing, with his situation and all the scrambling, I'm wondering if some, stretching back to last year, you think about 293. First of all, the decision to still book 293 in Sydney still ruins a little bit of this. And then this, when you could have had a 292 in Boston after top, 296 in Vegas at the end of the year, like that was supposed to be UFC 300, international fight. And it's just nothing. At this point, you look at the UFC scheduling, scrambling situation, you can't afford to wait anymore.
No, you can't. And from what I've heard, and this is probably why Dana got so annoyed when it was brought up at the press conference, the UFC might be using some leverage here in terms of trying to get Conor to sign a new contract, because I think he only has 2 fights left on his deal. Yeah. And from what I've heard, there could be some contract negotiation talk going on, and that's part of the reason why we're not seeing Conor in the cage as well. So if that's the case, I mean, the UFC's just got to cut it, because they're the reason we didn't get Dricus Adesanya already. They're going to be the reason that we don't get Conor Chandler. I mean, they got to stop being so greedy and give the fans the fights they actually want to see.
And at this point, let's be real. I know Conor McGregor is a big money draw, but he has lost consistently since winning the lightweight championship in 2016.
Yep. Cowboy was the only win.
And that's barely even a win, considering what Cowboy was going through and his, how late he was in his career, and that it was upper weight class.
Yeah.
So if at this point, if you're the UFC and you're Conor, let's just end this. Let's book this fight, and then let's, for Conor's last fight, let's give something that the fans have been long awaiting, and let's go out with a real big money bang and do the Conor Nate trilogy.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be awesome, because it wouldn't really mess anything up, and it wouldn't really, slow anyone else's career down in the process, because Conor and Nate are both kind of messing around and doing their own thing outside of the UFC.
And then, and I think I talked about with Zain. If Nate doesn't want to do it, then for the last fight, alternate option, you do the Conor versus Masvidal fight.
Yes, you guys did talk about that, and I actually completely agree that if we're gonna have a Conor fight at this point, make it Conor Nate 3, make it Masvidal, make it someone where we're not gonna have a guy like Chandler waiting. Yes, exactly. Why not? I mean, why are we going to keep putting Chandler through this ringer of waiting and waiting and waiting? He signed with the UFC after a whole career in Bellator and wanted to just get big fights done. And now he's wasted away over a year of his time, potentially where he could have had 3 fights in that year or something like that, just waiting for a fight that doesn't look like it's going to happen now.
Why do we need to put Conor in the title picture over again and pick him with contenders? Let's do, especially if it's affecting the schedules like it is. Let's do some evergreens. Let's do Conor Nate. Let's do Conor Jorge. Let's put Conor versus, I don't know, somebody, hey, if Islam goes on the run that he does, considering the rivalry between Conor and Khabib, let's do Conor Islam at some point, as a non-title fight at like welterweight. Let's have fun with this.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Why continue to drag this out?
I agree. I'm basically done with the Conor situation. I have been a little fed up for a while, but after this came out, it's just like, all right, just do what you want, man. I'm not going to care though. Yeah.
All right. let's play a little bit of like Zan and I do. Let's play a little matchmaker schedule. So UFC 301, as we talked about, confirmed for Rio, May 4th. UFC 302 reportedly is being targeted June 1st, Prudential Center, Newark, New Jersey. And then the assumption there would be 303 would be International Fight Week, Vegas at the end of June. I assume then 304 would be in July. Zay and I were talking, maybe that's London.
Yeah, the card that Aspinall would potentially headline that they've been talking about later this
Right.
year.
Aspinall, because I think we said earlier in the episode, Aspinall gone.
Yes.
Interim title. 305 in August. I mean, maybe you go back to Salt Lake, Boston, or you do some sort of other town that hasn't had a card in a while.
Yeah.
306 September. Again, I'm wondering with the timing of the schedule because, June 29th is International Fight Week, which means maybe July 20th, 3 weeks, so August 17th or 24th. Considering that, I'm wondering if that Nosha UFC card at the Sphere, if they turn that into 306 and they make that the pay-per-view.
It's possible. I mean, I was gonna say I'd expect them to go back to Australia this year, but if Izzy and Volk don't have belts, it might be tough for them. Might be tough for them to go back to Australia this year at some point because they're not gonna have a headliner unless it's a rematch or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one that's a little bit of a tough one to swallow. All right, 304 July, 305 August, 306 September. And then the assumption, the safe bets would be 307 October, Abu Dhabi. 308 early November, Madison Square Garden.
Yep, those seem locked in.
And then 309 at some point December, Las Vegas.
Yep, it seems like the scheduling for the rest of the year has really been able to identify at this point.
The picture is becoming clear.
Yes, it does. Exactly. That's a perfect way of putting it. The picture's becoming clear and we're starting to see what's happening down the line.
By the way, UFC, I see November 9th is a Saturday, and that's Veterans Day weekend. So you want to make my holiday weekend, which also includes my 30th birthday, a little special. November 9th, Madison Square Garden, maybe?
Ooh, that would be nice. That would be
would
nice.
help. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, no, it definitely would. And then they could throw some veterans on the card and stuff, and it would really get, like extra hype going. That would really be cool, honestly.
All right, so let's play our little matchmaker. So we talked about 301. They want to do this turnaround. I mean, let's talk about what we were talking about with Leon, because you mentioned before we start recording, Newark, New Jersey. Bilal Muhammad is a New Jersey native. So do they try to do Leon Hamzat in 301 in Brazil because they couldn't do it in America? Or do they wait to maybe, Bilal's not main eventing 300, but maybe he headlines one, Shadow of New York City, Bilal's home. Do they do that?
Yeah, I would assume that Leon versus Bilal is most likely the headliner for 302 at this point, and I would assume that the headline for the next card, 303, which is International Fight Week, would be Izzy Drikas. So it would kind of just be putting together the fights that were going to be the main event for 300 that now will just get pushed back a bit because they couldn't happen at that date.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're not going to do UFC Africa with Izzy Drikas, International Fight Week's probably the next best thing.
Definitely. And also, let me just say, I am sick of the rematches. For UFC 301, I am sick of the rematches. I know we're either going to get Pantoja Moreno or Pantoja Royval, and I'm done with it, okay? Can we stop the rematches at flyweight and let the young guys fight for the title? We have Muhammad Mohayev. We have Tatsuro Taira. I know they're not ranked as highly yet. They don't have that marquee win. You know what? Neither did Islam Makhachev. And look what we're dealing with now with Islam Makhachev. So I don't care. I'm done with the rematches. I do not want to see another Brandon versus Brandon, another freaking Pantoja versus Moreno, Pantoja versus Royval. I'm done with it. I'm actually done with it. Can we just get fresh blood in this division? It's been like 4 years now where it's just been rematches. What is up with the UFC in this flyweight division? They have good fighters, they have talent, and they just keep doing rematches. And it's so annoying, man. Like, I don't want to see the same fights over and over again anymore. I'm over it. So sorry, that's my little rant about UFC 301 and this potential headliner.
Listen, then all that needs to happen then is for Alex Pantoja to take out either Moreno or Royval, and you're gonna get your wish.
Yeah, I guess so.
At this point. All right, so if we're going on that, so 302 potentially Leon. And if that's the case, number one, yeah, I guess UFC and Dana, hearing what Pereira is offering, they may put their eggs in that basket, which is shaped like that head figure that they always use for Alex Pereira. I don't know what they call that.
It's like the stone head, Chama.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're putting all if that's the basket, that they're gonna put all their eggs in at this point,
Mm-hmm.
that can happen. And if that happens, by the way, I assume then the challenger for Rio in a Pereira turnaround like that, or even a Hill turnaround like that, would be as Magomed Ankalaev.
I mean, it has to be. Who else at light heavyweight would have a stake to the title shot at this point? Yuri's coming off a loss. A bunch of guys are coming off losses. Unless Yuri or Rakic does something crazy at 300 and they somehow swoop in and take Magomed Ankalaev's title shot,
Which
like we've
wouldn't
seen get
surprise me
taken.
because Dana
It wouldn't-
hates
He
Ankalaev.
hates Ankalaev, man. So I it wouldn't surprise me as much, but they would also have to be willing to make such a quick turnaround as well, which just seems unlikely.
Yeah. July. If Leon fights in America or Rio, then it would have to be Aspinall versus Gone then in July because Zan and I have talked about, if you're going to do a pay-per-view card in Europe, whether it be England or France, I mean, Gone and Aspinall, that's a big fight.
Oh, that's the fight, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, Aspinall's talked about Stipe turning him down. The Jones fight doesn't seem like it's gonna happen. I'd love to see it, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna happen.
I would
So
love to see it, but what I would love it is if Aspinall beat Gone, they do a tournament style, like if it's Aspinall beats Gone, Jones beats Stipe, and then they do the unification.
yeah, like a little four-man tournament where the winners just fight, and then maybe even the losers fight too. That'd be interesting. Imagine like a Stipe Gon fight. That'd be cool.
Fight, that would be awesome.
I
think he might retire if he loses to Jones
Probably.
personally, but I would love to see Stipe Gone.
Yeah, no, it'd be an awesome fight. I actually thought about that fight like years ago when like Stipe was the champ, Gon was coming up and everything, but obviously we never got it. That'd be a fight I'd like to see, but I don't. It's very unlikely if that Stipe stays fighting if he loses.
Well, my question is, and if we're going to assume then October Abu Dhabi is going to be Islam Makhachev, do you try for Jones Stipe then? Because I don't know if they would do it in August. My question is, would you try to get Jones Stipe in August, Jones Stipe in September, or do you wait for the original plan and try to wait for November MSG?
In my opinion, you have to wait for the original plan and just do the MSG fight that we lost last year. I mean, I went to that MSG card and it was awesome, but you could definitely notice that it took a hit without Jones and
And
Stipe.
I get doing International Fight Week because that was always in the talk too in the original plans. But if you're gonna do Izzy versus Dricus, that has to be a main event.
Oh, 100%. There's no question that Izzy Dricus would be the main event. It has to be the main event with all the hype behind it, with multiple countries be involved and everything. It's way too big of a fight to put as a co-main event on any card, basically.
All right, let's get into one other news story. Second inductee now for the UFC Hall of Fame class of 2024. Frankie Edgar for the modern wing, and now is going to be joined in the pioneer wing by Wanderlei Silva, the former Pride middleweight champion, the first fighter in Pride to win a championship and a Grand Prix. Then goes over for a nine fight stint with the UFC. Has had some legendary battles. His fight with Quentin Rampage Jackson from 2004 won that year's Fight of the Year honors. Man, just an absolute legend. I wish if it wasn't for the copyright law at this point, I would be playing Sandstorm throughout our talk here.
that would be a great tribute to Wanderlei. So, I mean, Wanderlei, we all know him. He's a legend. Obviously, his UFC career was a little bit towards the end of his career. At least most of his UFC fights were towards the end of his career.
And his 2 fights in Bellator weren't great either.
Oh no, those were some rough fights in Bellator as well. So that's the thing is the end of his career wasn't great, but we all know Wanderlei in his prime was the Axe Murderer. His nickname held true. I mean, at one point he was 27-3-1 at a division like light heavyweight and heavyweight, which is what he fought at basically his entire career. I mean, a 27-3-1 record. That's insane fighting these big guys. Insane. And he had wins over Rampage. He had wins over some very, very good guys.
Yeah. He was insanely talented. He was insane. Obviously, we talk about how Japan can be a little bit insane with their open weight stuff. I think it was like one of the open weight Grand Prix. Here he is as the middleweight champion of Pride, and he's taking on like Mirko Krokop. And the fight didn't exactly go well for him, but just the nuts on him, the guts on him to just do all that. And his rivalry with Chuck Liddell, his rivalry with Rampage Jackson. Rampage still wants that 5th fight. Maybe in the exhibition boxing, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, of course Rampage wants that 5th fight. He couldn't beat him for most of his career, so now he's going to try to do it when they're both old.
But look, if Frankie Edgar and Wanderlei Silva are the first 2 inductees in the Hall of Fame class of 24, considering the legendary names we had in the class of 23, class of 24 is really going to have a lot of power on this one too.
No, for sure. I mean, they've been doing really good with these Hall of Fame inductions. I can't lie. I mean, obviously, you could probably pick better, bigger names and whatever, but all the guys they've inducted into the Hall of Fame have all definitely have had a good enough reason to be inducted. And I haven't had a single complaint about any of these guys being included in the Hall of Fame.
For sure. All right. Let's get into our UFC 298 talk. I can't believe it's been all this time when we haven't gotten to the card yet. All right. Let's try to get through as much as we can. Ilia Topuria, the new featherweight champion of the UFC, pulling off an unbelievable and vicious knockout of Alexander Volkanovski to become the new champion. And you know what? I had predicted Volkanovski. I'll admit I was wrong, but I will also admit what I said last week. I said, if Ilia hits him with a shot, considering he's only a few months removed from the Islam Makhachev knockout, I'm concerned how Volk will react. And kind of like that Volk fight, 1 power shot to the head, and he went down.
Yeah, I mean, it was upsetting to watch after Volk's long title reign, after everything. I mean, I knew it was a 50-50 fight going in, and I knew Ilia had a decent chance of winning by knockout. But just the way it happened, I mean, he just kind of swarmed Volkanovski and just caught him once. It was a big 5-punch flurry. Only one of those punches landed well, but that one punch was vicious, and it put Volkanovski just immediately out cold. Like, that's the thing. The Islam knockout, he was there, but he wasn't. Like, it was a good stoppage. He wasn't there. This knockout, he was not there for at all. I mean, he was out bad. I mean, that right hand was vicious from Topuria. And I remember when it happened, me and my friend just kind of looked at each other like that for like 10 seconds. Like we didn't even say anything. We were
I honestly, I was like covering this fight, so I was like looking, in a back and forth thing, and I see him wobble. I'm like, wait, what? Like, that was just complete sudden.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really happy for Ilia Topuria, considering the rise that he has had at featherweight to now being an undefeated champion. They're already talking about what this means for Spain. They showed all the footage of, I think it was in Georgia, of him and the crowd watching him and Merab fight and win their fights. And we'll talk about Merab in a second. So Ilia has a lot of momentum at this point now. And they're already talking about the potential of bringing Ilia over to Spain, potentially doing a rematch in Spain. But look, I would love to see. I think Volk has earned a rematch, but I'm really concerned considering the 2 knockouts that he's had in like 4 months. I don't know. He needs to rest.
I had the same conversation last night with a friend, and to me, there's no argument that Volk deserves a rematch. You can't argue that Volk doesn't deserve a rematch. He deserves it. But do we really want to risk seeing Volkanovski get put out cold 3 times? Do we really want to, like, in a row?
Right.
Like, he's already, he's already 1-3 in his last 4 fights.
Yeah.
Imagine he goes 1-4 in his last 5 with 3 knockout losses in a row. I'm not looking forward to a rematch. I think he should take some time off, and I think he should fight Mobsar, honestly. I think the winner of Ortega Yair should fight Ilia at some point, and I think he should fight Mobsar and just take a little bit of a step down in competition in a sense, even though I know Mobsar is great as well. He should just calm it down just a little bit. And
I think that stretches back to some of the comments he talked about in the aftermath of the second fight against Islam, that he feels like he constantly needs to be in the cage.
Yeah.
And that worries me.
It worries me as well, because obviously we see what happens when he's overactive, and especially after a knockout like the Islam knockout was.
And you know what that really worries me, Pat? about his post career, because if he's one of those fighters that feel like he needs to be in the cage, is it going to end up to the point where he's in bare knuckle boxing or something when he doesn't need to be?
Oh, please don't even. Oh God, that's a horrible thing to think about. But I mean, we've seen it happen now before.
Hey,
So
we've seen it happen.
yeah.
So I'm a little worried, and I agree with you. I think because now if we're going to go back to our topic of like playing matchmaking scheduler,
Mhm.
you know, if October through December's locations for pay-per-views are locked up because of tradition,
September.
that would mean Spain would have to be September.
Yeah.
So, can you really trust Volk to be? I mean, September, that's 7 months. So maybe that is enough time to do a rematch, but considering those comments and the 2 knockouts in 4 months, like you said, is it a safer bet that the winner of this Saturday's Yair Brian Ortega fight ends up the challenger instead? Or at the very minimum, do you run with the rematch? And if Volk can't go, you have Bryant, the winner of Ortega Yair, as a backup fighter, weighing as a backup. And if Volk, for whatever reason, drops out, you have Ortega Yair, the Ortega Yair winner, step in. Or if disaster happens, which knock on
Seems
wood,
to
it doesn't,
always do.
and Ilia drops out of Spain, then in an interim title fight, you get Alex Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega 2, or Alex Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez 2. Especially if it's Ortega, because the first fight that those two had was a barn burner, and
Yeah.
I still would love to see an Ortega Volkanovski rematch.
I mean, despite how dominant it was for Volkanovski, Ortega almost got him out of there like twice. He had him deep in some chokes. And I mean, does is Volkanovski going to come back the same fighter after this? I can't see
And that's my
how he
worry.
does. I can't see how he does, honestly. Back-to-back knockout losses like that. I mean, we saw what happened to Kamaru after just one. Obviously, Volk looked okay in that first round, but I don't know if we're going to see that Volkanovski
And
again.
and and I love Max Holloway. He's one of my favorite fighters. But
Mhm.
Ilia Topuria is there, and even Anik mentioned on commentary, this really opens the door now for Holloway to get another crack at regaining the featherweight gold. I
Definitely.
don't know if that's going to happen though, considering he's fighting Justin Gaethje. But it points back to the problem that I've talked about with Max Holloway. Yeah, maybe you might want to argue he's too big for this weight class, but we saw him in that first fight with the second fight with Dustin Poirier in that interim title fight, 2019. He looked small for lightweight, to which Dana had even talked about, like in the post fight, he said, no, he's going back to featherweight. He's too
Yeah.
small.
And if I'm not wrong, Max is taller than Dustin, and he still looked like a significantly smaller fighter in that
Right.
fight, just because, I
So,
mean, Dustin just looked too strong for him in a sense.
so it goes back to what we talked about with Max being the quadruple A fighter, that he's, defeating all these up and comers that you're trying to put in his way. He's still technically in his prime, because I think he's only 31 or 32.
Yeah, something like that.
But if you're gonna have him fight at lightweight against Gaethje and he's gonna lose that fight, you know, obviously you can't give him a title shot off of that. But if Ilia wins in Spain and Holloway wins whatever other fight you'll give him end of 24, start of 25, you may not have a choice but to give Holloway another crack.
I mean, I wouldn't have too much of a problem with that either, as long as Holloway actually does defeat Gaethje. If Holloway loses to Gaethje,
Well,
it'll be tough. Oh,
I said if Holloway loses, then because I'm assuming Gaethje's going to win that fight.
okay.
But I'm saying if Holloway, let's say he comes back end of 24, start of 25 against
Okay.
another up and comer like a Movstar or something, and he wins that, like he's been doing against guys like Arnold Allen and such. It's like,
Okay.
then do you really have much a choice?
Oh, okay. My bad. I missed that part. But I think you just do it out of principle at that point. I mean, why not? Because Max Holloway was the former champion. He beat all the featherweights that aren't Volkanovski,
Right.
basically.
And if
So,
we're talking about, because they talked about over the weekend, the 3 kings at featherweight being Aldo, Volk, and Holloway. And if you want to really rise Ilia Topuria's stock, then while Max is still in his prime, you got to match him and Max up.
yeah, I mean, and actually, Max made comments at the fan Q&A before the fights this weekend that the UFC knew not to book Ilia against him because they wanted him to make it to this fight. So he's building a little bit of hype up there for that one too. And I mean, a lot of people feel the same way, I guess, because I mean, Holloway's been killing off all the contenders, and the UFC looks like they they finally learned their lesson and decided to just give Ilia the title shot. So I think he's right in a sense, but it doesn't mean he'd win the fight necessarily. So it's a fight I'm really looking forward to seeing.
And the thing is, if Max somehow does beat Gaethje and wins the BMF, are they gonna try to make that Ilia Max fight, or will they say, maybe Max, hey, here's your opponent, Islam Makhachev.
Hey, I mean, maybe they said, Max, you were supposed to fight Khabib years ago when Tony pulled out, and the doctors pulled you from the fight. Here's Khabib's protege. Do you want to do this now?
Oh my God, the possibilities are endless.
They are, and that's, I guess it's a very fun time at 145 and 155 pounds right now, especially like you said with Charles Oliveira Saryukin going down too. I mean, there's just so much going on in these weight classes right now that you really can't tell what's going to happen. It's just up to the UFC to make a choice, and you'll kind of be like, anything is good. Like anything is good.
Yeah. All right, co-main event: Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa. I have been a Paulo Costa hater for some time, but I give credit on this one. This was a fun one.
Oh, it was definitely a fun one, but I will say one thing. If Costa doesn't land that spinning wheel kick, I think we talk about this fight a lot differently.
Oh,
a lot differently. I mean, realistically, Rob was winning the entire first round up until that kick. He won rounds 2. He won round 3. It was without that one spinning wheel kick with 5 seconds left in the first round. I think we're singing a bit of a different tune about this fight. However, since Costa did land that and he did very badly hurt Whittaker there, I guess he proved that he's still a top middleweight. But
and that's the thing, you talk about a different tone. It could have gone a different way, because if he doesn't land that kick, obviously we talk about Whittaker sweeping the scorecards.
Yeah.
Or if he lands a second kick, we might be talking about Paulo Costa knocking out Rob Whittaker. We start to question Rob Whittaker's chin like we just did Volkanovski. And we talk about Paulo Costa being back in the title picture potentially. So, this was one of those fights that could have fallen either way, but Whittaker got the win. And, Whittaker and Max Holloway, Zain and I have talked about the same class, the quadruple A, that they only lose to the top 5, the guys that go on to the champs, and then everybody else, they trash through. They run through.
Oh, yeah. Completely agree. And Whittaker wants the Dricus rematch, too. So he's throwing his name in the hat as now another potential challenger.
Well, that's the thing. If Dricus, beats Israel Adesanya, then he got a Sean Strickland rematch and he got a Rob Whittaker rematch that you could, or maybe have to do.
Or Jared Cannonier's involved in here, too. Where does Jared Cannonier fit into all this? It's actually very interesting, because there's a lot that could happen at middleweight, too. A lot of these weight classes are starting to get really interesting.
Wait, Pat, let me throw in one other question. Where does Kevin Lee fit into all this? I
think somewhere with Renat Fakhretdinov.
Oh, what a name. Ian Machado Gary beating Jeff Neal. I'm going to be really honest. Ian Gary has, between this fight and the Neil Magny fight, he just isn't impressing me all that much.
I mean, he absolutely dominated and outclassed Neil Magny. It wasn't a close fight, but I mean, it's a fight he definitely should have finished. It was very disappointing that he didn't finish that fight.
This one was weird. Now, I'm not going to put all the crap on Gary, because it does take 2 to tango, and Jeff Neal just didn't throw the trigger.
I mean,
there was something off about him.
I mean, it was like in the last minute of every round, he finally woke up and was like, all right, let me land a combination or two. And every time he threw a combination, he was landing them. He was catching Ian Gary, but he just wasn't throwing. And when he would just like jab right into the clinch. And I mean, I hate to say it, I did expect this. I did expect this from this fight. I did not think this was going to be a fun fight. I did not think it was going to be that good, because I just don't see either of them being the aggressor there. And Jeff Neal had to play the aggressor, and he didn't do it well. And it led to Gary kind of just staying at range and doing his thing.
And I get Ian Gary wants Colby Covington, and considering the trash talk those two have, that would be a lot of fight hype. But again, it brings to my point that I've been talking about of, if you pair Ian Gary with Colby or with Kamaru or Leon or Bilal, somebody at the top, or Hamza Chimaev, somebody at the top of this division, I don't think Ian Gary's going to be ready for any of them.
No, I'm not sure if he is yet either. And I mean, we saw Jeff Neal hold him up against the cage for a bit of their fight. We know that's what Colby loves to do. So even then, Colby also landed the most significant strikes in UFC history against Robbie Lawler.
I think if honestly, I know he's talking about retiring Colby Covington. I think Colby Covington completely outclasses him.
He definitely might. I definitely could see it like that. The only way that he doesn't, in my opinion, is if Colby really has lost a step and looks the same way he did in that Leon fight and just doesn't push and doesn't do anything. That's the only way I see it happening.
Fair enough. But I do think that against somebody who hasn't, in my mind, proven themselves to the top level like Ian Gary, I think that's a winnable fight for Colby.
Oh, definitely. I definitely agree that.
If Colby does show up in that kind of way, I would still have questions about Ian Gary taking on a Kamaru or a Leon or Bilal.
Yeah, I would as well.
I think the UFC is so caught up in trying to make the next Conor McGregor that they're failing to see, he's going to get a rude awakening soon.
Yeah, and the scorecards in that fight were a bit weird. It was 2 3-0s for Gary and then 29-28 for Jeff. So the scorecards were a bit weird, but they kind of made sense, honestly, because the first 2 rounds were so close. They were toss-ups. And then I feel like Gary probably did take the 3rd round. But either way, the scorecards were weird, and it represented a very weird fight. So I think they were good.
Fair enough. We talked about Merab before, and man, probably the most impressive fighter on this card other than Topuria is Merab Dvalishvili. And I think considering all that he did in that game, and considering, the fact that he beat Henry Cejudo at his own game. He completely out-grappled, out-wrestled him, picking him up and walking him across the cage. Matt Hughes, Frank Trigg style, while talking to Zuck in the front row.
Oh, it was awesome. It was an awesome move by Merab. It was kind of a badass move. Like, it was really...
Give him the O'Malley Vera winner right now, Cheeto Vera winner right now.
Dana said he'll get the title shot. I mean, Dana said he'll get it. I mean, he deserves it a lot more than Cheeto, let's be honest. I mean, the only reason Cheeto's getting it is because he's O'Malley's only loss. So I think that Merab more than deserves the title shot at this point. And it was a very impressive and dominant performance. I was actually surprised that Cejudo ended up taking that first round. It was he caught Merab with a big punch. He took him down, and he looked really good to come out. But then I don't know what happened to his arm. I think he broke his arm, they were saying on the broadcast or something like that. And once that happened, Merab was like, like he smelled blood, and he just kind of attacked and took him down.
And I mean, look, I don't know if I want to see Cejudo retire. And everyone's talking about, well, the 2 losses, at this point, you might as well. But again, we're all failing to consider that if one of those judges in the 288 doesn't screw up the 5th round and scores it right, we're talking about Cejudo as the champion in the division.
Yeah. I mean, such little things could have changed the course of Henry's career. And honestly, though, it all comes back to the fact that he retired so early for no reason.
That I agree. I think he tried to play the UFC, because it was during a time where, Jones requested out because of the heavyweight dispute. Masvidal requested out over pay. Conor retired again because of pay. Nunes teased that she was going to retire. I think Dana, seeing all of that, I don't think he ever forgave Henry Cejudo for doing that, retired.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you can kind of tell if you look at the salaries that were released for this card. Cejudo was only making like $150K to show. As a former champion, former 2-weight champion, it's kind of crazy that he was making such little money for this fight.
And they didn't allow him to retire again because he said during press conference, "This is Merab's moment." Yep. I think Dana holds a grudge against Cejudo.
Oh, he 1,000% holds a grudge against Cejudo, no doubt.
All right. Opening fight in the card. Anthony Hernandez submitting Roman Kopylov. This one I got completely wrong. I thought this was going to be a finish for Roman, and Fluffy proved himself on this night that he is worthy of ranking at the weight class.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Kopylov as well. I've been, on the Kopylov train, thinking that he was gonna hit the top 15, get going finally after a tough start to his UFC career, and I mean that the grappling and pressure was just way too much for Hernandez. I mean, he kind of just stayed in his face the entire fight, kept pushing him against the fence, and I said if Hernandez gets him down, it'll be a problem. But I just wasn't sure if he would. He got him down, and he was able to work that choke. And I mean, great job by Kopylov, 1, defending takedowns throughout the fight, and 2, defending that choke off the first time. But an amazing job by Fluffy to be able to keep pressuring that choke and make sure that he was going to get the finish when that fight hit the ground.
And Fluffy talked about his post-fight press conference about, this is his first fight since tearing the ligament, which got him out of the original UFC card. He talked about being his worst enemy in training, and he needs to stay healthy because he wants to make a deep run. Now, he doesn't have a particular opponent in mind because he doesn't pay attention all that much to the rankings. He's not obsessed with it. But I look at some of the names in front of him. Obviously, I'm looking before they update for 290, the post 298 results, but Chris Curtis, but he's booked. Paul Craig's in front of him. Jack Hermanson also in front of him, but I think the idea is it's going to be Imavov versus Hermanson next. Roman Dolziz is right there too. So I mean, Paul Craig, Roman Dolziz, maybe that's next if Hernandez is looking for a step up in competition.
I think Paul Craig is booked right now too.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's still a really good matchup. I think I don't know. It should be someone in that 10 to 15 range for Hernandez next, just to really like cement himself as a top 15 fighter in the weight class, and then from there, give him the number 5 guy if he wins that. For all I care. I mean, he's fun to watch. He's exciting. You saw he had the choke locked in, and he's like. He's shaking his head. He knew he had the choke. He knew he was winning that fight. He's a very entertaining fighter.
And they screwed up his walkout music too.
He said after the fight, they screwed up his walkout music, and it's like,
well,
it's hilarious.
I was curious at first, like, wait a minute, why is he coming out to opera like Kevin James in the Here Comes the Boom? And I'm like, wait, what is this? And then it turned out it's the wrong.
Yeah, I don't know how they messed that one up, but at least it got him in the right mindset in order to go out there and win that fight. So,
well, you know the story. So you've heard the story about Rory McDonald that somebody always picked his walkout music because they didn't have the right contact information or something like that.
Oh wow, I actually didn't know that. That's hysterical. Rory's a funny guy.
Featured prelim, Amanda Lemos defeating Mackenzie Dern. Big performance by Lemos, and I don't know. Were you also baffled when Mackenzie Dern, when the result was being read, raised her arms up?
I don't know what she thinks she heard. I don't know if she got so deep into her Brazilian heritage that she forgot English and didn't hear them announce Amanda Lemos as the winner. But she apparently it took like a couple seconds before, it took a little bit before her coach said to her, like, Mackenzie, no, you didn't win. Like, she was still celebrating for a bit in the cage there. Like, she wasn't running off in frustration. She was happy. And it was Mike Bone. I want to say Mike Bone's the source. He said that she talked to her coach after a couple seconds, and then she kind of just laughed it off, and then left the cage in like decent spirits and whatever.
Well, at least she laughed it off.
Yeah, but I mean, that's going to be a meme for a bit now. Is Mackenzie Dern's running away with her hands up in the air like that, thinking that she won a fight that she almost got finished. She should have got finished in. I mean, there's a very good argument that fight should have been stopped. So,
and because Mackenzie Dern had an opportunity these last couple of fights, but man, her striking, ever since she parted ways with Pereira, it's been bad.
Well, apparently she was with him for this camp.
I know, and then I hear that. Yeah, she was with it, but it still looked terrible.
Yep, and no, her striking is not top 15 level. To put it simply, I don't think her striking is top 15 level.
It never had been. But as she was getting her win streak, I thought she was making progress.
The Angela Hill fight was the one that really showed like some progress, and she kind of just regressed after that somehow.
Complete backtrack. Yeah. All right. So if you want to give this card a letter grade, Pat, like Zain and I usually do, what would you give it?
298, right?
Yeah.
A-. I enjoyed watching the card, to be honest. I mean, the start was a little slow, but it really kicked up when it needed to, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, start was a little slow. A couple of fights could have been better. So, I mean, I'll put B+, but still not a bad card.
No, not a bad card by any means. But by far the best card this year. Let's get that out of the way. I mean, better than 297, better than any of the fight nights we've had.
But I still think, this is setting up for, there's got to be some sort of explosion kind of card. Like we had 290, 291, and 292. Yeah. Something's gonna, it's one of those things where it's like, it was good, but it still left me desiring for something bigger and something.
Hopefully 299 gives us that, because I mean, that card is ridiculous.
299, 300 are something else.
And hopefully 301 will be really good as well. The UFC has a lot of Brazilian talent that they can bring over there to fight in Brazil. So,
but let's talk about this weekend. PFL Bellator head-to-head. First card for PFL for 2024. first card of Bellator under the PFL banner. So this should be something else. The main event on the PFL side, it's heavyweight champ versus heavyweight champ. On the PFL side, it's Renan Pereira. And on the Bellator side, of course, Ryan Bader.
I mean, classic match of striker versus grappler, and heavyweight especially, because Pereira has that one shot power that he's gonna put a lot of guys out with just one big shot. And Bader's been a wrestler; he's been around for forever, veteran. I mean, this would be a massive moment for both men, obviously, but I feel like it's a bigger fight for Pereira to really prove that he is in the upper echelon of heavyweights out there, and that he can put out someone like Ryan Bader, who's been dominating the division for a while.
And that's the thing, because obviously, the joke about Bellator, it's all, washed up names or who or what, but you look at the level of competition, the names that Bader has beaten versus the names that Pereira has beaten. It's clear the fight experience factor goes into Ryan Bader's favor.
Yeah,
And Ryan Bader has faced off with some heavy hitters. And don't forget, Ryan Bader is a heavy hitter himself, too. He has quite a few knockouts on his resume as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is going to be Pereira. It's his biggest test and it's his toughest test.
Yeah.
Now he has the one shot power. You're right. I just don't know if I think Ryan Bader is going to be ready for that. So I'm going to go with Ryan Bader on this one. I don't know. Now, everything on this card, let me double check with you, is 3 5-minute rounds. It's only 3 rounds, right?
Yes, you are correct.
So, I mean, if this was a 5-round fight, I'd go with a finish. But since this is only 3, I'm going to go with a Bader decision on this one.
Okay, I actually, I'm with you on the Bader side of things, but I actually have Bader by TKO in round 1. I'd say maybe round 2, only because Ferreira's grappling, from what I've seen, is atrocious. It's honestly atrocious. So if he doesn't hit Bader with
so you think Bader's going to get like a submission or something?
No, I think Bader's going to put him on his back and just pound him out, and Ferreira's not going to be able to do anything about it. I think it's not going to be like a knockout by any means. I think it's just going to be a situation where Bader gets him like flattened out on his back or whatever, and then he Ferreira rolls to his stomach and is just eating punches, and he can't do anything about it, kind of thing. I feel like Bader's grappling is too strong, and if he doesn't get hit with that one shot while coming in for the takedown, I feel like he should easily win.
All right, so I'm going to keep track of our predictions. So we both have Bellator up 1-0 here. All right, co-main event. It's also champ versus champ, but little difference in the weight class. So obviously, PFL did not have a middleweight weight class for its seasons. Impa Kasaganai ends up winning the light heavyweight championship, but he does have a history of competing at welterweight and middleweight. So he's going to drop back down to middleweight, and he is going to take on Bellator's middleweight champion, Johnny Eblen, one of the best fighters, not at middleweight, not signed to the UFC. I think Impa has the great story that he has had, and the one thing that concerns me about this fight, now, our buddy Zain is going all the way on Impa. He's been on Impa's train. I've been on Impa's train as well, but this is a fight that concerns me only because he has looked so good at 205. I have interviewed him twice over the last year, and he has felt like he has a home at light heavyweight. He feels, kind of at peace. He feels great ever since he signed with the PFL and jumped up to 205. Moving down to 185 again, even just for one fight, that does concern me a little bit, especially because I believe there was a fight in Eagle FC. I don't know if that was the middleweight fight, but I think when he fought at middleweight, he actually missed weight for the fight.
I'm not sure if he missed weight, but you are right. He did have the fight in Eagle FC that he lost in a close decision as well. And I'm not sure about the weight class on that. I could check real quick if you'd like.
I'm actually I'm actually on his thing right now. So
okay.
Eagle FC. All right. So actually, pardon me, he actually began as a middleweight, dropped down to welterweight, and the fight in Eagle FC ended up being at a 179-pound catch weight. So he missed weight for welterweight.
Okay.
But in the UFC, the UFC was where he fought at middleweight because he did have the loss to Buckley.
Yes.
So still, when you're comfortable at a weight class and you're finding the success, to go back down to where you were okay, but maybe not as successful. I don't know, especially when you consider, like I said, Johnny Eblen, his grappling, his grappling's great. His striking, he's just becoming an overall, he's still developing, but he's becoming an all-round.
Yeah, well-rounded, very well-rounded Johnny Eblen.
You know how they talk about 5 tool players in baseball?
That's
That's
Johnny
what Johnny
Eblen.
Eblen's becoming.
That's a perfect way to describe it, and I completely agree. And it kills me on the inside, but I will have to take Eblen to win this fight by decision. I don't think he finishes Impa. Impa's a tough guy to finish. I mean, it took a Joaquin Buckley spinning hook kick to get him out of there for the first time in his career. And I'm not sure if Eblen has that one in him, but he definitely is good enough to take on someone like Impa. And I think Impa is going to give him problems. I think it's going to be a closer fight than people expect, but I still think Johnny Eblen will win a decision in this fight.
And I'm going to be in complete agreement with you, just because I feel like, they obviously the PFL is not going to have a middleweight division for 2024 either, but it seems like the officials at PFL Bellator, they want Johnny Eblen to basically be the face of Bellator at this point with how he is at middleweight.
Makes sense. I mean, he is probably their best pound for pound fighter across all their weight class. Patchy Mix too. Patchy, I like Patchy Mix a lot. He's good. But
well, that's the thing. He and Patchy are going to be the faces of Bellator at this point.
And neither of them are going to get a fight for like most of the year.
That sucks.
I know.
All right. Unfortunately, this card has taken a hit in its champ versus champ fights. So obviously this was supposed to be Magomed Karamov, who became a 2-time welterweight champion with his win in the 2023 season, taking on Bellator's welterweight champion Jason Jackson. Magomed Karamov forced off the card. In stepping in, Magomed Karamov's old rival, also a 2-time PFL welterweight champion, Ray Cooper III. I'll be very honest. Ray Cooper III has not looked the same after becoming a 2-time champ. Between the missing weight and the opponents that he has faced, it just has not been good. Jason Jackson has a whole lot of momentum building after the knockout of Amasov, and I think he's got more tools in the bag. Cooper's chin, I have question of. I think Jason Jackson finishes him in a round or two.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't even really thought about a prediction for this fight. I kind of just thought, yeah, Jason Jackson. Jason Jackson beats him. He's just so much more well-rounded and just so much more hungry at this point in his career. And I know it sounds stupid because really you think hunger is going to play a role? I do. I think Ray Cooper has nothing to fight for other than a check at this point. And I feel like maybe he'll be hungry coming into this fight due to getting put in a position he really shouldn't have been in. But I really just think Jason Jackson's hunger right now, he really wants to prove that he is the best welterweight in the world, and he'll take on a middleweight for that because Ray Cooper's basically a middleweight at this point.
And I will say that, this card has taken quite a bit of hits, and it really saddens me because it's still a good card, still has some champions, still has quite the talent on it. But, if you're the PFL, you maybe want to book a pay-per-view for summer, early fall, where you can get
100%.
Magomed Karamov Jackson, and you can get Cyborg versus Pacheco, maybe get one or both of Jake Paul or Francis Ngannou potentially to make the MMA debut on that pay-per-view card. So that way you can get, you still get some of these other big name fights that you still have in the canon.
And you forgot about Pinedo Pitbull too. I mean, you have a whole card of champion versus champion fights that you could still do later this year. I mean, it'd be a big mistake by PFL, in my opinion, to not do 2 cards, especially after the way this one is kind of falling apart.
And I know for the lightweight, and I know lightweight might be a little tough to make because OAM retired, obviously. So you would have to find somebody for the lightweight champ versus champ, but there's still something you can work out.
Well, there was a bit of a rumor that Usman and Chablis were going to finish their Grand Prix and end up fighting.
That's the other thing. Usman Nurmagomedov also still, I think, dealing with the suspension that he had to deal with. So obviously that take the hit. And you're right, because with all the Bellator cards that you're going to have internationally, this and Nurmagomedov still dealing with the suspension, this does open the opportunity to allow PFL to finish Bellator's business, finish that Grand Prix. And then we can make, the winner of that versus Usman Nurmagomedov. And then the PFL, whoever they pick for lightweights, and then we figure that picture out.
That would be the right thing to do, in my opinion. You should honor the Grand Prix that was started in Bellator and honor both the guys that ended up making it to the finals.
And give them the $1 million prize at the end.
Yes.
This one's interesting. It's Bruno Capoloza on one side, Vadim Nemkov on the other. But this is not a light heavyweight. Vadim Nemkov has vacated that title. That'll be on the line, I think, during the first full Bellator card in March. Vadim Nemkov jumping up to heavyweight. He's talked about jumping to heavyweight. He's talked about chasing Ryan Bader again and grabbing the heavyweight like he did the light heavyweight. So this is interesting. And I think Bruno Capoloza, good PFL heavyweight talent. It's a good test for Vadim, but I think Vadim, with his grappling, he might have this one.
It's really tough for me to say because Nemkov is a beast, and he's a lot better technically and skills.
Right. I guess the only concern I have is maybe the size factor. How is Vadim going to look?
That's my big concern is Nemkov was never really even a big light heavyweight in terms of height. And he has a built body, but he's never that big in terms of height. And Bruno's a bigger heavyweight. I mean, he's only lost to some really big guys himself. So the size difference is very scary for me here, but I think I still have to go Nemkov by decision just because he's so much more skilled technically. And I think he has more tools and more ways to be able to win the fight.
All right, so Pat, this is a little scary. We're 4-0. We're both 4-0 up for Bellator.
Oh no, are we?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Let's see if the luck changes in this next one. It's Thiago Santos, Yoel Romero. Beef versus beef, basically. To be power versus power.
Yeah, no, I mean these are two of the biggest guys in the weight class. These are two of the biggest guys that we've ever seen fight. I mean, they're both just massive human beings, and I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting when you have a guy like Romero at 40 plus years old, 45 he is now, and you have a guy like Thiago Santos who's also at the end of his career. Like it sucks that it fight's happening now, but I feel like it also is a great time to see them fight because honestly, I have no clue what's going to happen. I would have to lean Romero taking this fight by a decision, I guess, but this really could go either way, and they're both just going to go in there and just throw everything they have. I think they're just going to start throwing bombs out there.
So I think this fight and the next fight we're going to talk about is PFL's best chances of getting a win. But like you said, I'm not strong in this prediction because this one can go either way with how both of them are. Especially because, both of them also are a little down from the point where they were at the UFC as title challengers. I'll go with Romero as well by a close decision. Yeah. But this is one that I could totally see Santos winning too.
Yeah, I agree.
The pay-per-view opener, though, oh man, I think this is the fight I'm most looking forward to. Clay Collard and AJ McKee. This one needs a lot more attention than it's getting.
I completely agree. This is going to be one of the better stylistic matchups on the entire card. And I feel like Clay Collard is just going to keep pushing that pressure, and he's going to force AJ to basically take him down. And it's going to be interesting to see if AJ can get him down. I do think he probably will, but it depends on if he can keep him down and submit him from there. Because if not, Collard's probably going to put some heavy pressure on him on the feet, and he's going to make McKee work for it. I am going to end up picking AJ McKee in this fight to win. I'm going to say a second round submission. I'm going to say AJ pulls some tricks out of his bag when he gets Collard to the floor and gets him out of there. But this is one that AJ could very easily lose if he's not careful, and if he lets things get out of hand early, it might not ever go good for him.
Yeah, especially because you consider Clay Collard and the wars that he's had in the PFL and the talent that he's faced, because he's been the guy, that when those ex-UFC talent go over, like OAM and Shane Burgos, they pair him up with Clay Collard, and Clay Collard holds his own against him even if he doesn't get the win. But AJ McKee, he is I've talked about the perfect example of how a home promotion builds somebody up from their first pro fight to a world champion. Because they took it nice and slow with him, allowed him to build, and then he started to run through some familiar names, veteran names. Grand Prix comes along, runs through everybody, beats Pitbull, becomes the champ, and it's only lost that Pitbull fight. And that was controversial. Yeah. Some people thought that McKee should have gotten the nod in that one too. So, momentum's a big thing. So I'm going to go with McKee, but I think this is a tough fight for him. I think Clay Collard has every right, that if you picked Clay Collard, I wouldn't go against it. I think this is going to be my pick for the fight of the night.
Okay.
And I think this is one that you need to watch out for.
Yeah.
And service is not good. We went all Bellator on the main card. This is not good for PFL.
No, this is not good at all. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they definitely could win a couple of these matchups. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
I feel like, losing Pinedo, who I thought would have beat Pitbull. I was going to pick Pinedo had that fight still been on. And
Underdog story of the year. Yeah, that would
and
have topped it.
and if Magomed Karamov was fighting Jason Jackson, I
would have picked Magomed
I
Karamov.
probably would
Yeah.
have picked Magomed Karamov as well. So it's like PFL losing these fights has only hurt them in terms of the amount of fights they could potentially win on this card.
The return of Clarissa Shields as she takes on Kelsey DeSantis. We haven't seen Clarissa Shields in the PFL since 2021. She had her third round TKO against Brittany Elkin and then lost to Abigail Montez. The controversial split decision, which I don't think should have been a split. So I mean, again, this fight's going to be at 165, which originally I thought was a shot at the UFC with some 165 talks, but apparently Clarissa wasn't going to make women's lightweight. So they bumped it up, and Kelsey DeSantis had said some words about this.
Yeah, DeSantis didn't seem pretty happy that she had to accept the fight up a weight class. And let's be real, it doesn't seem like she has much pull here. Obviously, Clarissa's the A side in this fight. So I feel like Kelsey just had to do whatever she could to keep this fight on. And I feel like she was pissed off at the fact that she had to take this fight at 165 pounds.
That said, I mean, the question is all this time away in the sport? Because Clarissa Shields, her striking can never be questioned as a undisputed champion at middleweight and light middleweight. But, is Kelsey DeSantis going to try to grapple her this whole time? Is Clarissa Shields ready for that after all this time away?
I don't know. I mean, if she gets grappled, she'll probably lose. It just depends on, how good her takedown defense is, I guess, which it wasn't great the last time we saw it. But she has been out of the cage for a bit, so maybe that's something she's been very much working on, and maybe she takes this win. I don't know.
Unless she's just hoping that the power could lead her to a victory, and maybe it can. I don't have great feelings about this one, as I do say Kayla Harrison going over to the UFC.
Yeah,
But I'll go with Shields. I'll go. She manages to get the job done. Maybe a split decision. Maybe a unanimous decision. I don't know. I don't really know Kelsey DeSantis how much power that she can take, and if Shields is going to really bring that power that she does in the boxing cage. I mean, the boxing ring. But regardless,
I think I'm going to take Shields by decision as well. I feel like that's a fairly safe pick in a sense, but I feel like it definitely could be the result. I mean, DeSantis has lost by decision twice in both of her losses, so.
All right, let's look at UFC Mexico City. Couple big fights here. We talked about this one earlier. Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval, the winner projected to challenge Alex Pantoja for the flyweight title in the co-main event of 301 in Brazil. Moreno and Royval have also faced each other in the past. Moreno ended up getting the win, finishing Royval in that fight. I've been a Brandon Royval supporter since his LFA days, and I said that when he was the LFA champ, I said he is going to be in the UFC and he's going to do big things, and he has.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of he has been, AAA. He hasn't been able to get that big win to give him into the contention. Now, is he going to be prepared for Moreno this time around? I think so, but I don't know. I feel like Moreno is just too talented that I think he's going to give Royval problems, and I don't know. I don't know if this one's going to go to a decision. Now, he finished Royval the first time pretty early. I'll give Royval a couple more rounds, but I think this goes Moreno third round finish.
Okay. I also want to point out this was supposed to be Amir Albazi versus Brandon Moreno. Brandon Royval did step in on short notice to fill in for Albazi's injury, and I know the first fight there was an injury that led to the stoppage and everything, but I just think Moreno is probably the better fighter. I think he'll probably get it done maybe by decision, but I want to say round 4 he gets it done by submission. I think he'll probably
Okay.
I think he might pull out like a late submission over Royval, and I don't think he's going to be in much trouble throughout the fight. I know Royval's dangerous, but I think Moreno's slick enough that he'll be able to stay out of danger for most of the fight and then find a late finish.
Fine prediction by me. And that sucks because Amir Albazi, you talk about needing other names, in the title pick. Amir Albazi is also one of those names, and he will get his due when he gets off the injury, but it's just a shame that injury kind of plays a mess here.
Yeah, no, it kind of ruined everything for the flyweight division, if you want my honesty, because if Moreno beat Albazi, I would be more apt to seeing him fight Pantoja again, but a rematch with Royval doesn't really give me a reason to want to see him fight Pantoja again.
And then co-main event, also worth talking about Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez, because we have featherweight title eliminator potential in there. Had Volk won against Topuria, you could have argued whoever won this fight would get a rematch with Volk. But obviously with Topuria now, things are a little more, complicated. We talked about the scenarios. Maybe the winner serves as a backup to a rematch in Spain. Or maybe the winner, if Volk needs to take excessive time off, the winner is Topuria's first title defense. The thing about this, I don't know what Twitter account I was following, but they had a whole thing about UFC fighters, have they gone to Mexico City, to acclimate to the elevation and whatnot. Somebody said Ortega's still in California, which question, that's a flag. That's a red flag if that's true.
Yeah, no, definitely. Unless it's like very, very Southern California where it's right on the border of Mexico, then all right. But if he's still like in the middle of California, top of whatever it is, I definitely think it is a red flag because the elevation in those areas isn't what it's like down in Mexico. And I mean, he should know. I mean, he has like Mexican heritage, if I'm not wrong. So he should know that the altitude there is different and that he should be preparing for a longer fight in those kind of conditions.
Absolutely. I still think this is going to be a fun fight. I think
Mhm.
this is going to be, I know Ortega's great with his grappling too, but I think this one's going to be a striking fest. I think these
Mm.
two are just going to toe at each other until one of them goes. Um, and I think I have more confidence in Yair Rodriguez striking defense than I do Brian Ortega's, given some of Ortega's more recent performances. So I'm going to go with Yair Rodriguez. I think Ortega's a little tough to finish though. So give me Yair on a unanimous decision. And
Okay.
this to be fight of the night.
Okay. I was actually there for their first fight and I was extremely disappointed with the way it ended and the result and all of that. So
I have more faith. I have faith this time around.
yeah, I have more faith this time around that we actually get a good fight. And it might be a crazy pick because a lot of people don't seem to be picking him, but I think Ortega's going to sub Yair. I thought he was going to do it the first
Ooh.
time, and I think that his chance got cut short. Obviously, he was losing the first fight, but if you've ever watched a Brian Ortega fight, he loses most of every fight until he finds a submission win. And I think this will probably look similar where he's losing the fight on the feet pretty clearly, and then somehow swoops in a submission in like the second round and gets the win.
All right. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. One more time, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media, Facebook, X, Instagram at MMA Outsiders ETB. Make sure to follow the network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to go to our audio-only platforms, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more. If you are listening on those platforms, make sure to go to our YouTube home, youtube.com/ETB Network. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're climbing up to 700. So we thank you all of you for your support. Go to etvpodcast.com. More information about the network, blogs from some of our contributors, and so much more. And big shout out to Wool Spreads, the network sponsor, now network wide. And Pat, I want to thank you as well for all of the filling in that you did and all the talk that we had. I know it was a lot of talk, but
Yes.
a lot that we had to talk about.
Most definitely.
That's Patrick Danna, producer Pat, Combat Sports UK journalist. Make sure to follow him on social media at Pat Danna MMA. I'm Tom Albano, contributor to MMA News, Fansided MMA. We'll be starting up our 2024 season with the PFL, with that PFL Bellator Supercard. Stay tuned for that. Follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. All right, we're out. For Pat, I'm Tom. We'll see you next week for another edition of the MMA Outsiders. Take care, all.
Ooh, thanks for having me.